All right. Any other thoughts on boxing before I talk briefly about this potentially industry-changing contract with Francis Ngannou, now former UFC heavyweight champion?
Speak on it.
Okay. A little bit of context here. This is the first UFC active champion to lead the promotion since 2004 in BJ Penn. It's been for a very long time almost impossible contractually for fighters to actually get out of a contract as a champion due to champions clauses, as they put. And they were in UFC was in a major legal issue with antitrust lawsuit coming down the pipeline, and they changed some of the contracts to allow sort of a sunset window on contracts, even champions. Francis Ngannou used that sunset clause to become a free agent, to put his value on the market, so to speak, and see who can be the highest bidder. The UFC has since actually closed that sunset clause in the contracts, by the way, which I found very interesting.
That's funny.
But reportedly that the UFC was offering him up to $8 million per fight, including to fight John Jones in a pay-per-view, with upsides in pay-per-view money after certain thresholds were met. Francis Ngannou turned that down for the PFL being a much smaller promotion. And he won't fight for at least a year due to trying to look for a boxing fight, which the UFC denied him doing. One of the reasons why he left the UFC, because he wanted to pursue boxing. The UFC denied him that in a very restrictive contract way. And we don't know the exact amount he's getting. We do know that it is 7 figures. So it is $1 to $9 million. And the game-changing aspects of the deal is that he has negotiated that all of his future opponents, which is about a 2 to 3 fight contract, will get at least $1 to $2 million guaranteed. I would say this is the first time in combat sports history where a fighter negotiated in part of their promotional contract a guaranteed purse for their opponent as well. Also, he's been given equity of the company. He's been named chairman of their sort of division in Africa. He will be sort of the lead creator of their event in Africa, their first ever event in Africa. So he's been giving a lot of ownership, both over his career and the direction of this company as a fighter.
You don't think that's a lot to take on?
Oh, it absolutely is. But he's only signed for a 2 to 3 fight contract. So I think this is going to be sort of the
next 2 years.
What's it be? The swan song. Last hurrah, make a lot of money, and then now be in a leadership position within the company. Now, obviously, in boxing, for boxing heads that are still listening to this, the idea of a fighter also being a promoter is not really that shocking, I guess. Right. But in MMA, it is very, very shocking. This has never really happened before, where a fighter has been given equity in a company like this. On top of it, like I said, the idea of negotiating on behalf of your opponent, that's not even set yet. That's an act of like solidarity amongst fighters that has not existed. And we've had major unionization efforts within MMA. We had boxers flirt with it. You know, I was in communication with boxers at the time, back in 2016, 17, that were interested in the idea of unionization, or at least forming an association of boxers, help provide for healthcare and such like that, pensions. I hope that this is a step that all big fighters take, because that will hopefully lead to the idea of all fighters within a promotion having ownership within that promotion, getting guaranteed purses, being able to determine their purses as well, having some sort of stake and say in it, similar to what we see in collective bargaining in major sports, basketball, NFL, and such, right? And I want to point out this is also during a time when UFC has hit record highs in finances. They made almost $6 billion in revenue last year, and while they admit fighter pay is lower now than it has been for some time, especially with inflation, it's actually at historic lows. So MMA being very much monopolized, hopefully, again, this is a step in the right direction. It's not the win of a full-on fighters union, as we almost got a few times in MMA, But this is big stuff. I don't know if any of you care to make a comment.
Yeah, there's no fighter union for UFC, right?
No.
Right. I mean, they need. I mean, like Major League Baseball, the NHL, Major League NBA, NFL, MLS. They all have a players union. They need a fighters union, right? I mean, when you read something like that, right? The lower payouts in our best year. I mean, a union would solve that in like 5 minutes, right? But I mean, you need someone, a representative to kind of bring everyone together and say, look, this is what's happening. Let me go negotiate this for you.
Yeah.
And that would be solved. Now, like PFL was the organization that Clarissa Shields fought in, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, it's got money. It's not a shoestring organization, right?
Yeah, I would say it's one of the top 5 for organizations in MMA.
Is this going to be I'm asking you to speculate. Is this going to be a real alternative? Because this kind of break UFC's stronghold, or is it just going to be like a side thing?
This in itself will not break the UFC monopoly. What will start happening, I think, is the idea of like big names in the UFC being like, man, he got equity. Like he got a say and stuff. And he was able to negotiate for other fighters too. And then they start trying to do that for the UFC. And the UFC very quickly start losing control of the situation. Where it's a bottom-up sort of struggle where the fighters in the UFC are like, well, he got it. Why can't we here? And a company that's making $6 billion, way more than any other fight promotion in the world, in all combat sports. The UFC is bigger than all of them. So that, I think, is where it starts happening. And there's already been attempts. So I think we are, let's say in the next 10 years, very likely to see that happen. But it's unfortunate in combat sports. I know you don't think it's combat sports, but professional wrestling, famously had a unionization effort that failed. Jesse Ventura, former governor of Minnesota, yeah. He tried to lead a union amongst the wrestlers, and Hulk Hogan ratted him out to Vince McMahon. And then Jesse Ventura was fired. He sued the WWE, and through that lawsuit, he was able to find all this stuff out through discovery and deposition, and he was able to get all of the royalties from the DVD sales, the VHS sales, all that stuff. So it was a big deal in wrestling, and it changed a lot of things there, but still no union there.
I think the refs have a union now. The boxing refs.
They do.
Right? And cutmen and stuff.
Yes.
Because I know obviously cutmen you have to get certified and stuff through the commission, but they have gotten right in the past couple of years.
It hasn't taken off drastically.
I know, but
it does exist. Yes.
It does exist, and they're trying to put it together. I mean, I always wanted for the fighters when I worked for boxing promotions. Always wanted this for fighters to get benefits because I realize what they need and what they go through and how much money it takes in this business. So I always wanted that for them, but not knowing that it wasn't there. Like I don't know how to start a union. Like, I mean, if I did, I'd probably start, but I don't. And then I heard that they had the union for the refs and stuff. I think I heard Ray Corona talking about it.
Yes. There's also a boxing pension in California as well. It's not in other states, but it is in California. I think if you fought like 10 times in California, you're automatically enrolled in a pension fund. But there's going to be a lot of steps for whenever this happens. For those that want to know more info about it, the very first interview I ever did on this channel was with a guy named Lucas Middlebrook, who was one of the leaders of the unionization effort within the UFC that failed.
See, because if we pay taxes since I did all the paperwork, we pay taxes off of what we pay them, then shouldn't they be able to get like at least Social Security when they retire?
Oh yeah.
Right? Because they'll have it on record because we pay taxes.
Yes.
We everything we pay taxes.
Yes.
So just that's all. At least they have that, because I know it, when you work for not under the table, but it's not like, where you can do your taxes correctly.
Public employees probably also have an easier time getting unionized as well, I will say. That's not like a blatant fact, but if you notice, like police unions, teachers unions, sanitation workers unions, like a lot of public workers are unionized.
Yeah.
It's going to be easier, right?
For refs and officials to be unionized. But it's hard for fighters because they're not employees. You have to remember that. For those that don't understand that, if you're not an employee, you can't be in a union.
But there's like a Screen Actors Guild, and they're not. That's a private union, right? SAG.
Yes.
They're not employees either, right? So it would have to work. I don't know how SAG works exactly, but it would have to work in a similar format to that.
There are exceptions to the rule, but for those that like are trying to become unionized in their workplace, if you're not an employee, the National Labor Relations Board will say you have to get employee status first. So it's a little bit of that. You're right.
Like
there are exceptions.
When I was a stockbroker, right, I was 1099. I was a private contractor, right?
Mm-hmm.
I technically didn't work for the brokerage firm. I was a contractor there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Same thing.
Yeah, and technically, if you're a 1099, like you're not supposed to get uniforms, you're not supposed to be told where to go. You're allowed to work in other places as a 1099 worker.
Right.
For example, the UFC, they get dress code. They're told where to go. Right. They're not allowed to fight anywhere else. Yeah. So that's why for a long time the argument's been it's very easy to be determined as an employee.
Right.
But when they got all the way to the National Labor Relations Board, at the time it was under Trump, and Trump best friends was Dana White. Dana White gave actually a speech at Trump's rally.
Yeah.
Is that why Fox News loves that guy?
Yeah.
Because he's all right. I was like, because the guy seems like a piece of work to me. Like,
he got caught beating his wife.
Yeah, I seem like a good dude, and he's always on Fox News and stuff. Like, what? That makes more sense.
Anyways, shout out to Francis Ngannou. I think all fighters should try to get equity in whatever promotion they're working under.
Yes, 100%.
I will say this though: the big issue with this new deal is that he will get all net. He'll get split all net revenue. Ticket sales, all that stuff. UFC fighters don't get that. They don't get ticket sales.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Boxers do, like the big boxers.
Yeah.
But net revenue, go for gross revenue.
Yeah.
Put all the costs of a loss on the owner's side. You're the worker. That loss shouldn't be on you. You should collect a share of the gross revenue. Mm-hmm. And that would be, I think, the next big step for a fighter contract. The idea of gross revenue instead of net revenue.